What's up, guys, and welcome back to the revision where we take your favorite and not so favorite movies to see if we can make them better. I'm your host, Derek.
And I'm Jason. Welcome back, guys. This week we're talking about The Mist. Derek, why don't you tell us a little bit about this movie?
The central theme explores what ordinary people are driven to do under extraordinary circumstances. It revolves around members of a small town in Maine, because Stephen King, who, after a severe thunderstorm causes the power to go out the night before, these people meet in a supermarket to pick up their supplies, and they struggle to survive a weird mist that engulfs the town and has really Lovecraftian monsters that provide tension.
Well said, well said.
Yep.
Yeah, so you like it, you hate it? What's your thoughts on the movie, Derek?
Oh boy. So here's where me and you need to figure out where we are on this page,
Yeah.
because people will die on the hill of the ending. The ending is what will make people like it or hate it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's definitely where I feel, because it's the last thing that you come away from, and it's very potent. So probably want to wait on that.
Yeah, I will say you've
I don't
seen
wanna
this
immediately jump
movie
into that.
several times now. This was my first time
I
watching
have.
it.
So I'm
So-
very interested to see what, with it so fresh in your mind for the first time and seeing it, not knowing about the twist. Very curious to hear what you have to say. But before we get to that, I want to hear, probably for the rest of the movie, what generally makes up the bulk of it. What was your take? Especially from you, I think it's more interesting to hear what you have to say, as I'm definitely someone who is a Frank Darabont fan. I've always been, everyone always loves Shawshank and usually Green Mile, but then there's The Mist, which people don't really talk about unless they're Stephen King or Frank Darabont fans.
I enjoyed it. I don't think it's a bad film. I think there was some parts that it tried a little bit too hard to appeal to audiences and lost sight of the vision, maybe. Just a little. I almost think there was a little bit too much focus on getting in action scenes and not as much. It took away from some of the emotional and thematic elements of the story.
You would have liked less. What would, like, maybe seen less of the
Yeah,
creatures
keeping
and
it more
of a focus
focused on the
psychological
people.
aspects.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not that it didn't do anything with that, but I think it kind of went back and forth, and they'd be like, "All right, that was a little bit too much." They would try to squeeze in a little bit of action every so often, which is not a bad thing to do, but I don't know. I feel like it could have been maybe woven in a little bit better than just everyone freaks out, and then once the dust settles, then everyone kind of picks their side again, and then something crazy happens, everyone freaks out, and then the dust kind of settles and they pick their side again. It was kind of rhythmic like that I don't know if that helped.
So this is where me and you might disagree on this. Stephen King characters are always crazy.
No, yeah,
That's like a solid rule you have to go off of. Which I'm not saying that's not what you're saying, but that's definitely a solid rule that you have to begin as a foundation. Two, if you look into what Frank Darabont wanted to do with this film, not saying he necessarily executed it perfectly, he was trying to make something that harkened back to the old 1950s monster movies. Because actually his preferred version is, this movie was also made in black and white. And if you get specific versions of it on Blu-ray, they'll come with a black and white version. He really was inspired from those older kind of movies, but then taking elements from kind of what we've seen with more modern horror films.
That's interesting.
So I think that's because I'm wondering if one sticky point for you is the characterization. Almost everyone is not a complex character in the slightest.
No, I think it totally makes sense for the story it's going for to have everyone basically a caricature of an archetype. I think that streamlines the story. I actually liked that about the movie.
Okay.
Kind of reminded me of Lord of the Flies in a way. I do think that some of the issues I have with this are some of the same issues I have with Lord of the Flies, which is it does kind of come back to when you simplify the characters, you're willing to force them to do things to make your point when it doesn't necessarily flow from their base
So
personality.
you don't like them making dumb decisions.
I mean, that's really what it comes down to, but kind
But
of
this is a horror
forcing.
movie.
Yeah, I know. That's just kind of a problem I have with the genre in general. Some of them, sometimes it's like, okay, like if you put the characters in an absurd enough situation, which this movie definitely does, there's times where it's like, okay, that makes sense. And then there's other times where they'll do one thing one way and one thing another way in the span of like a couple minutes. And it's just for the sake of getting the story where they wanted to go. And it's like, you could have had a different character make the other decision. Things like that. It's just kind of like, well, I don't know. Like they're like, for instance, just to be a bit more concrete about it, when they go to the pharmacy, and they find the MP guy, and all the spiders come out, and the one guy's leg gets all shredded, and they're trying to save him. Then the other guy gets a little web on his face, and they're like, he's dead already. We're not even going to try to help him out, and they just leave him for dead. And they're still trying to drag this other guy, and eventually they realize, he's dead too, and he's just actually dead. But it was just kind of like, why didn't you either try to save both or leave both behind? It was a little weird.
Well, wasn't the guy's brother there?
They went there to save the guys. Yeah, no, his brother was injured. They went to save his brother. So the only person that would have cared that he died was already dying anyway. So they didn't have like a personal motivation to save that guy any more than they did the other one.
But also for the people who like want to make it to where like I might be stretching here a little bit. Also the people who this one brother's dying, making sure the other one can live if it looks obvious that the other one's going to die anyway.
Right. But
so there's a little bit of
there's an argument to be made for sure. But and I think that's the case for any dumb decision.
Who came with them that they left.
I think you can always stretch an excuse for dumb decisions in horror movies.
And also, people don't make good decisions in high stress situations.
Right. There's some times where you just don't you don't expect them to or not, and so I think that's kind of where I was getting at with the difference between the action and the character moments. Is some movies do a really good job of showing the mental state of a character, so that you can kind of see why they're acting a certain way. To use a Stephen King example, like The Shining, I feel like they do a good job building Jack throughout the movie so that when he goes crazy, you've seen the seeds of it the whole time. Even if it's far-fetched, you can see the building of it, where sometimes this movie kind of, we see the points of it, but we don't necessarily see the transition in between, because the transition happens in high-strung action scenes that are more focused on just the group and the horror elements than on the actual characters themselves. So that's what I have to say about that.
Okay.
But it's not like a huge problem I have with the movie. It's more so it is a problem with a problem inherent in the genre that a lot of movies have to struggle to overcome. So I think for this movie did do a good job in clearly defining certain characters and their roles in the story.
Yeah. One thing I'll say that I really like about this movie is I think it was, granted, the CGI is not great. We're talking about a 16-year-old movie CGI, and this was a generally low budget. It wasn't mid-budget. It was maybe like upper low budget, because it was like an $18 million budget in 2007. And I have to assume a decent amount of it, well, maybe not a decent amount of it, but there's a lot of familiar faces.
Yeah, I was going to say a decent amount went to the cast for sure.
I mean, I will say, I don't know if there's one guy that I literally see in every single, he's in Shawshank, Green Mile, and this, and it's the dude who's running from the mist into the building in the beginning, like when the mist comes in.
Yeah.
And probably him, he was just like, hey, I'm doing a movie. Okay, cool, I'll be there.
Yeah. If anyone knows the deep cut of a movie Rocket Man, the Disney comedy film from I don't know when, him and then the one mechanic guy are both in it. So I just kept thinking of that movie the whole time, which was kind of funny.
Well, also,
shout out to Rocket Man fans.
The mechanic dude is also in the other two Frank Darabont films as well. Because he plays in Green Mile. He's the dad of the
right. I mean, I have the same thought when I see them in those movies too. So
you're just like, oh, Frank Darabont. So they're probably here. What do you think of, if we're gonna specifically talk about characters? Let's talk about our lead. What did you think of Thomas Jane, playing David in this? What do you think of this kind of character? Because this character, you have a survival type movie. Whether it's supernatural, disaster, or not. And they definitely seem to be going for the everyman
Yeah,
approach.
that's one thing that was kind of interesting.
Being thrusted into this. How do you feel what do you think of his performance?
I thought the performance was pretty good. The more emotional parts, I was a little bit not in love with the performance. Like when he's really emotional. For the most part, I liked it though. I didn't think it was
okay.
It was not a bad performance by any means, but there's some parts that require like the utmost care in portraying the emotion of the character, and I think those moments fell a little flat on the acting side.
Yeah. What about on the side of the crazy religious zealot, Mrs. Carmody?
I don't know. That's the type of character that you really only see in movies. So it's kind of hard to have a frame of reference for what that might look like in real life outside of that. But as far as the archetype that I've seen in other movies, it was played
she did a
fine.
Really
Yeah,
good job.
It was played like exactly as I would expect. Fit the role.
Because you hate her, like watching it. You could see like her. You know, it's very interesting to see. Stephen King usually pulls a lot. He has crazy religious people in a lot of his stuff, and it's very interesting to see how he'll use it, especially in this movie where it's so forefront of that. How taking typical religious ideas that whether you are into religion or not, that he's still pulling from into a character, and then that character's thought process about life twist that religion to honestly feed into their kind of insanity or craziness.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was pretty well done, showing how her zealotry was to make up for basically her trying to hide her own sins, because she would immediately go from trying to, say the right things and do the right things, and then immediately snap at people and show that she was actually one of the worst people there. She had a lot of evil in her that instead of confronting, she would cover up and mask with her religion, and I think that was
I think
showed pretty well.
The bathroom scene was done really well of showing her
Yeah,
character.
I would agree.
Any other notable characters? I like the random inclusion of I never can remember his name, and no one ever knows his name as an actor, but Toby Jones, who played the one grocery store worker, the like nerdy guy who can shoot. I like just.
I love him in anything.
Whenever
yeah.
I see him in movies, it's pretty much when he shows up in Captain America or showing up even in the most recent Indiana Jones, which I had some issues with, but I enjoyed his part for sure.
Yeah, I always enjoy him, so definitely highlight. I will say a highlight for me was Sam Witwer, because I can never get enough of him.
I was about to bring it up.
Second he showed up, dude, I was screaming. And then when he started screaming, I just had flashbacks to playing Force Unleashed. I was like, man, this was me. This was me getting killed by Palpatine in the final boss fight.
Which a lot of people will probably know, obviously because of his face, that he's from Force Unleashed, but also that he played Maul in Clone Wars, that people might be
definitely a prominent figure
in
Star Wars for sure.
Yeah, it's again, they have a cool ensemble cast that they brought together, and it's an interesting mix of people. You also have like 4 Walking Dead actors in here, like future Walking Dead actors. Melissa McBride has a very notable minor role in this movie. It's only like 2 scenes, but it's also, when we talk about the ending, we could talk a bit more about it, but it's very interesting to see how they use her to kind of show when people give into their fear versus having faith, which is definitely like one of the central themes of this movie. It's like, when you are afraid, what are you turning to? Is it blind faith, or is it a false prophet? Is it denial? Like, how are you rationalizing being put in this sort of scenario? Which I do like that movie, the movie I do think handles that well past a stereotypical point of view, specifically showing with her character. Which maybe this is a good transition into us talking about the ending. Because depending on what we think, and when we get into the revision part of this, we might have very different opinions on how to handle this, or we might, exactly line up. I'm not sure. But to transition into talking about it, I like that she is one of the few people who is trying to act out of just straight up love for her children, for care, and being willing to, despite the mist that's out there, what could kill them. They literally heard a man die, and even still, she's like, I need to go get to my kids. I need to make sure they're safe. And then she is protected from any harm in the end of the movie when we see her being rescued.
I like the concept of it. I didn't like the presentation.
Really?
I didn't like her dialogue. I thought it made her come across as snarky.
Okay, the dialogue is a little
yeah,
rough.
It's very
I
dated
that,
when she's like, "Won't a man escort me home?" I'm like, "Woman, you're strong and independent. You can handle yourself." But I could see her saying like, "Guy, like." I could see a way to spin that where it doesn't come across that way.
Yeah.
I just wasn't a fan of her performance because it came across more demanding than pleading. And she also just seems so judgmental in that scene when she says, "You, how about you?" and just looks them all in the eye. And I was like, I don't think that was necessary, because it just came across very entitled, and it just made me not like her.
I mean, yeah, the movie they're definitely using her as, the guilt, obviously, against all those characters and trying to... It's definitely the movie being like, oh, look at these true colors of people, or at least hint to what we see later.
Yeah.
So, no, I will give you that. The dialogue could have been better. I still like how they use her, though.
Yeah, I almost feel like a way you could do it better is if she's, handicapped or something, and so she does need assistance, and maybe you do have someone volunteer to go with her thinking they're gonna die and end up being okay. That might be a way to do it.
Yeah, like maybe maybe she's like disabled
in
some way, like maybe
just
she has a
something
limp,
that makes her need someone to go with her, because it was weird her begging people to go with her, or alternatively maybe they're trying to hold her back and she's like, no, this is my priority, and she, she gets through the crowd and escapes or something. I don't know. There's a way to do it. We can get into it now, or we can come back to it. It's up to you.
Before we get into it, I want to specifically, since we've kind of brought up the ending a little bit, let's actually discuss the ending to kind of figure out where we have to go from here. What was your take on the ending? I
will say I kind of figured that's how it was going to go down.
Because that's not the original ending of the novella.
Right, yeah. I was talking to my sister earlier, and she told me about how the book ends, and they basically just kind of drive off, and it's more ambiguous as far as I'm aware. Whereas this...
there is a radio transmission that sort of gives a more hopeful side, but yes, it is generally ambiguous.
Yeah, where this is very cut and dry. I liked the idea of it. I was kind of excited for it. The main thing, though, is I think the time scale of that hurt the scene a lot, because...
What do you mean by time
scale? It was weird how quickly they were just like, well, we're out of gas. Let's all die. There was, very little thought put into it. Because at first, on one hand, I'm like, this is more of, the it's a horror movie, you can't expect this. But I'm like, you have 4 bullets. It's not that hard to use 1 bullet on 2 people. If you're you can line up 2 people's heads and, not to get too graphic.
Yeah, but I also think they probably don't want to make a scenario where someone's bleeding out and not actually dead.
To me, I would almost prefer for one thing, I'd prefer they waited, and they're all just hungry and they're like, we're not going to, they say, well, a little bit of hope, we'll hold out. And they jump to a couple days later, and you can tell they're malnourished and they're hungry and they have nothing left, and we've got to do something. And you can maybe do a couple times where they're eyeing the gun and they're like, no, and one of them's like, oh no, we can hold out.
You're just I think you're just dragging out the inevitable.
I do think so, but I think that makes it
more
hit
potent
harder because it just kind of felt a little forced when it just or oh yeah, let's just die. I think it would have made it hit harder to drag it out a little bit.
I don't know.
And you
I feel
just
like
keep having them eye the gun.
kind
Just,
of,
I mean, not like an excessive amount of time.
like, yeah, I feel like we're kind of just dragging out the inevitable, because then we're making it more obvious that that's what we're trying to do.
Right.
At least in my opinion.
To me, it's kind of like the bomb in Oppenheimer, where you get to look at it for a couple minutes before you even get the blast, and then when the blast hits, it's fast and quick, and it just hits you all of a sudden. But because of all the buildup, it feels so much more powerful. To me, that's what that scene could have been if they had stuck it out a little bit longer. And maybe
I could agree.
And
that
you could minimize the
drag it
driving
out
if you want.
bit.
Just I would take away from the time of their driving and add it to that scene. And you don't even need to show it for an extended period of time, but just, do a couple shots fading between, showing them, slowly wear down and sleeping, showing a day-night cycle, whatever you need to do, even if it's a day.
I don't even know if you really need to show additional scenes. I think you could just
not additional scenes, just
have
additional
some
shots,
dialogue.
just a couple shots or something.
Well, I mean, like, when they're driving and the song's playing, you could probably have maybe a little bit of dialogue or a little bit more visible malnourishment.
Mm-hmm.
So by the time they get out of gas, they're like, we're hungry, we obviously can't go
Right.
any far, we can't get anything.
And maybe,
like, it's a little
something
bit more...
to show, something else, something better to show the passage of time, maybe a working clock in the car or something, I don't know. But just some way to show that this is, like, absolute desperation, because it just kind of felt like they had worked so hard and then they just gave up.
I also think they're thinking about because they really weren't safe in that supermarket. How safe are they going to be in this car?
Yeah.
If they stop moving, you're standing still with all that stuff out there. And that's since they'd seen some of the huge creatures outside.
Right.
Like, I understand. Like, they literally, like, ran out of gas, and then within 5 minutes, they're all dead. So, I will give you that. But I still also think, like, you're in the middle of the mist. You have no clue where you are. You can't get to anything because the moment you step outside, they are thinking they're going to die.
Right.
I understand that a little bit. I think maybe you just need to drag it out a little, but I
don't
think it
even just make it more of even just make a
vehicle.
little debate with what was the main character's name?
David.
Just have David protest a little bit. Be like, no, guys, like we can do this. Just like have him a little, at least one of them. I think it works best with him if he's a little more hopeful, and he ends up being the last one that has to deal with the situation.
I do like what they do with his kid, though,
yeah,
where his kid's
another
just sleeping through that.
solution that I think could put. I'm curious what your thoughts are on this, as maybe not a solution, but alternative idea is instead of 4 bullets, there's only 1 bullet left, and they all have to, and they kill the kid. And then they all have to live with that. I almost feel like that's...
But why? What would be the point?
Well, for one, it makes the decision a little bit more powerful, where they're all deciding, let's kill this kid. And also I feel like, to me, that kind of fixes the expediency, where they're like, I don't want this... Like, the motivation is, I don't want this kid to suffer. So I want to help him. And so they're doing, because the entire movie, like, kind of the whole point at the end with having the woman from the beginning survive is there's like, is the idea that the self-preservation mindset is what got them all killed, right? Is they were trying, they wanted to avoid pain for themselves and for others, so they ended up all paying the price. Well, she prioritized her kids and made it out okay, is kind of what I got from that. And so I guess if you make it, I don't know. I don't really know where I'm going with that one, but I feel like it makes it a little bit more sensical as to why the decision needed to be quick. I guess then it gives someone to share the pain with him, so it might take away a little bit from the impact.
Yeah, I'm gonna be honest. I'm probably gonna fight on him, anyone else but him being there at the end, because the entire movie we are watching. Again, this is supposed to be this every man who promised to keep his son safe, and everyone around, and he's been trying to be good in trying to keep as many people alive through this as he can, and that number just keeps dwindling until it's just him. And he has to live with that. Yeah. I think, in my opinion, I can understand the time scale being changed, but I don't think who gets killed and who is left should change at all, in my opinion.
Yeah. There's just something about the way that it happens in the actual movie that just feels a little, it feels like it falls a little flat for what it could have been. Because like I said, I'm like, okay, this car's going to run out of gas. They're all going to die.
Honestly.
And the only question I was like, is someone going to show up immediately after? And they showed up immediately after, which I think makes the point. I think that's fine.
But I think that was the point. That is 100% the point, though. That is 100% the point. Like, that he
with
has to live with that.
The impact
that, like,
of it?
Immediately, if they had just been yes.
Right.
Him killing all of them, yeah.
Yeah, I think I like them showing up immediately after. I think makes the point as good as you could. I wouldn't change that. I don't know. It just it fell a little flat, and I just didn't.
Alone. I feel like if you,
I'm okay with I think him being alone at the end is fine. I don't think that's a problem. That's more so just to. It seems like if you have 4 bullets, you can be a little bit more. That's more just to have a way to get around the laziness and just using 1 bullet per person. Because to me, that was just kind of like that's kind of dumb.
I mean, I'll be honest. If I was in that scenario, that's my thought. Because again, if you're using 1 bullet for 2 people, I'm pretty darn sure with how that's gonna work, it's not gonna instantly kill 2 people.
Right, but this dude was willing to die any way he could. So I'm like, okay, if he's the last one.
Well, he's willing to let them go out without.
Right, so you just give that. Well, I don't want to get too morbid with this because I'm getting into a rabbit hole. So I'll yield the point, but yeah. More so, I feel like the just the decision of it felt less impactful when it was just so brash. So I think there's a solution there, but yeah, I do think that while having a single bullet kind of affects. I mean, what you could do is. This is just another swerve, is they're sitting in the car and they're saying, well, maybe someone will show up. But I guess it's more giving into the despair. I was gonna say you could have it so that they do end up getting attacked in the car while they wait. And, the old folks go down trying to get away.
You're going against the theme of the movie, in my opinion, at that point. Because, again, I think the theme is fear. Mm-hmm. So I think if you just put an actual thing for them to fight, I think that changes the ending from what. I think that ruins it for me. I think the idea is that they don't know.
Yeah.
They, in their mind, are so afraid they let fear control them, and it ultimately led to a bad outcome.
Yeah, and I would agree. I don't like that idea. As I was thinking through it, I didn't like it, but I don't know. I think there's some way there to make it more impactful, because it definitely detracts from me that it feels like another silly horror decision that's not thought through instead of pure desperation.
I don't know. I think me and you are probably just not going to agree on this one.
Maybe that's the case, because I definitely like the idea of it.
Because it's one of my favorite endings to a movie, actually.
Yeah.
For what it did, for that it actually would take that sort of an ending. Because most survival films want to make it to where, yeah, we can kill some people along the way, but our main people, they got to stay alive. And the fact that he actually killed them in a way that would hurt our protagonist, honestly, the most, rather than him being dead, him living with the guilt that he killed them in a false hope of keeping them from suffering, when in reality they were safe.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm not pushing back on that at all. Definitely, it's more so I like the idea so much that I just wish I had felt that it was sold better. That's mainly
Yeah.
I love the idea of it. I think it's a really strong ending. I just don't think that it's sold the best, and that detracts from it.
I did not catch that.
It didn't seem to me it didn't feel super well sold. I wasn't like, this is the only way it could have ended. And I guess that's not what I'm trying to say, because obviously you're supposed to feel like, oh, they should have done something differently, but they didn't know any better.
That's the entire movie, though.
Right.
Literally, it's just a series of bad choices every step of the way.
Mm-hmm. I don't know. To me, it's like, you want to make it look like it's the only option, and then after the fact, you realize it wasn't. But in that moment, it almost doesn't seem like they think it through to say, okay, this is the only option. I mean, they do, but it's just so fast. It's just too fast.
I think this stems from where you said you have an issue with horror movies with people making bad decisions.
Well, no, I mean, watching that
scene,
scene, I'm sitting there, I'm thinking, yeah, the only thing they can do is either kill themselves or just wait for the inevitable. That's the only options, and waiting for the inevitable is horrific because of all the horrific things we've seen at this point. So it totally is a sensible decision. It just to me was too fast. That's really what it comes down to. It was too fast of them running out of gas and saying, well, that's it. Whereas before they had tried so hard, it would have made more sense if he's like looking around, he's like, all right, do you guys see anything out there? And they're like, no, there's nothing out there.
They can't see anything. They can't see anything.
Well, yeah, but him looking for literally anything else instead of the first thing he does when he runs out of gas is look at the gun.
And I'm wondering if that means maybe again this is where we add some additional shots, but I do wonder if that comes more from maybe there should have been more of alluding to that they were maybe thinking about it, because the other adults definitely seem to be like there's almost like a pre decision of like, oh yeah, this is
I mean, you could do that when they're just driving around. Is the couple in the back, one of them is like, why don't we just use the gun now? And he's like, no. And they keep going.
Or you could have one of them bring up like, what are we gonna do when we run out of gas? Mm-hmm. Like, what happens when if there is no...
Yeah, maybe more, instead of just a montage of them driving around, make it a discussion about...
Which, granted, that music is great.
Yeah, I did like that scene, which is why I think you might want to draw it out at the end, instead of in the middle of that.
Which maybe we can draw it out a little. I just don't want to, like, drag...
No. It's not like I think we need another hour of the film there. I feel like just an additional minute or two of either discussion or passage of time as they are just sitting there waiting, and they're like, maybe
I would just say maybe a little bit more of a build up to the
just build it up a little bit more to, like, first saying, like, looking at the gun and saying, no, someone could show up, you don't know yet. And then, they hear some noises and they're like, we should use the gun. He's like, no, not yet. And finally they're like, it's been 2 days. Something's going to come get us at any moment. Let's just end it. And finally he gives in. And then, a minute later, the military shows up and he's like, oh my gosh, I feel like that just hammers it home that
right.
Giving in.
I think we have an idea of what we want to do there.
Yeah.
Let's start this from the beginning here.
Yeah.
Where are we wanting to make our changes?
Yeah. So the next biggest thing for me was the way that the woman was presented at the beginning of the movie.
Which woman are we
the
talking
one
about?
that survives at the end.
Okay. Wait. What do you mean survives?
The one that
you mean the
we were talking about earlier.
The one that's okay.
With
sorry.
the two kids.
There's too many women. Yeah. Okay.
I don't know. I don't know if it's just if you just need to change her dialogue so she doesn't come across as snarky.
I would say that's pretty much it, because
Is that it?
I like the bookend of the scenario. The beginning of the conflict and the end of the conflict, showing basically it's the movie telling you what they should have done, which was blind faith, trusted in only by love.
I think
in this scenario,
I think we just need, the main thing is, why does she need someone to come with her? I don't get.
I would say instead of saying you, more of a, maybe again come across more as pleading, maybe a slightly more maybe less somber and more emotional.
But even still, like, does she need to borrow someone's car and maybe someone is that what it is?
I mean, again, I think a disability might be.
I feel like to me that's what you do is she is a disability and she needs help, and someone does end up going with her and they also survive. because it's someone being
That might
completely
be-
selfless, and you make them the point of it more so than her. I mean, you could make her the point of it too, because she's also prioritizing her kids.
You can make both the
Right.
point. Because, well, and also I think that would work because your thought process is a person with a disability. This is going to be definitely a person who's going to get killed. In this
Right,
sort of
and
scenario.
someone is just, giving it all up.
Yeah. No, I think that's definitely the way. Definitely, I would say we adjust our dialogue
Okay.
to where it's not just saying you, and have someone actually stick up for her and willing to go, and everyone be like, "What are you doing? You don't even know her. Like you're crazy or something." Like maybe pleading with him and trying to pull him in, where she's already made up her mind because, I mean, she's gonna go after her kids.
Yeah.
So maybe that's probably the better way
Yeah.
to handle that. All
I
right.
like that.
So
Another simple thing
Okay.
that's less of, it's not really a story thing, but definitely think that it definitely was jarring to me when the only people really making decisions for the whole movie were dudes, except for the religious chick. I was like, okay, can one of the women not just sit and take care of the kids the whole movie? I think that's a quick fix right there.
yeah, possibly.
But other than that, as far as story beats,
I mean, I feel like generally. I mean, are you generally happy with what happens in the middle part of this movie?
I mean, generally, yeah. I mean, there's some goofy decisions, but I think for the most part, it's explained well enough that I'm like, okay, I can see where it's coming from.
I enjoy the deaths. I enjoy how they handle them. I definitely enjoy how slowly they build up for Mrs. Carmody in growing a following, and why, because of just how desperate the situation is becoming. I think the passage of time there helps. So at least for me, I primarily wouldn't change much of anything else until they leave the store.
Pretty much. I mean, I think one thing I might do is, instead of having the MP be
Or
the one,
are you wanting to change the pharmacy? Yeah.
I would probably do the neighbor instead. I thought it was the neighbor, and I was like, oh, that's such a good bookend to his character. And then it wasn't, and I was like, oh, it's just the military guy.
No, because which I do like that line that he says when well, what if you're wrong, when he leaves and is like, I guess I would have had the last.
Because at first he goes, I'm sorry, we were wrong. And I was like, oh, it's him. And then I saw the MP thing, and I was like, oh, it's just the webs. I can't recognize him.
No, it should have been. Yeah, I completely agree. That needs to be the neighbor. That's an easy swap.
And they had the brief thing where they were like, oh, the military guy said it was them, so the military guys know what it is. I think that they can make that logical leap without having a military guy tell them it was them. Because they would have been talking. They all seem to know about a secret military project. Just have them talking about that the whole movie. And then finally someone's like, all right, we're confronting, like, have them kind of talk about confronting the military guys the whole time. I feel like that's just a small thing that they could add.
Yeah, I would
Is it the military guys? They might know something, but we'll worry about it when we get there. Right now we need to focus on surviving, just a short little line like that here and there. And then finally they come back and someone's like, all right, well, we know it's you guys. We've been here for days. What is going on? And you can still do it that way without needing directly the military guy to be there. I think it's much better bookend for the neighbor character. I
agree with that. I think that's definitely better. Because I think the neighbor should have been the one who was saying that. I definitely think that's better. Okay, so in that regard, then anything else until we get outside? Until we leave the supermarket.
I don't think so. Maybe
I guess everything else works.
Another small tweak is if they had that poking rod they had later in the film to poke the squid arms to get out of the garage door, because garage doors have like it's not gonna push a squid out. So something else to kind of get the tentacles out instead of, oh no, there's a door closing, because those tentacles could lift an entire dude. That garage door would feel like nothing. But that's just another nitpick.
Yeah.
Because that's the thing. I feel like this film, there was a decent amount of nitpicks I had, but as far as what the movie was going for, I really liked.
Yeah, I was gonna say I feel like, and we want to make sure that when we're doing like,
I don't want to nitpick
changes,
every
that we're
little
not
thing.
just
Like
nitpicking
for
here
one
and
thing,
there. Yeah.
the zooms were killing me, dude. I was like, bro, why'd you make it look like The Office? The zooms were killing me. I don't like zooms
I
9
think
times
it's
out of 10.
supposed to make you
so.
feel.
It's because
Okay,
it just
okay.
takes you out of it.
worked for
It
me
makes you
'cause
feel like you're safe behind a camera, and it kind of ruins the immersion.
See, that's not actually how it works for me though, because it generally feels more like it's supposed to be. I guess I didn't grow up watching The Office, and that's a more of a newer
I
thing.
mean, I
for
didn't
me,
either.
so
I just
seeing
don't
those
like zooms ever.
It feels a lot more like not found footage, but just and for me at least, it makes it feel more like real. Which I don't know. I feel like this movie does a good job, in my opinion, of making you kind of feel a part of this group.
I don't know.
Survive.
For
At
me,
least
yeah, because
But again,
zooms
it might be two
tell
different
me I'm
perspectives.
looking at a I'm looking through a camera, and it immediately breaks the.
Well, you're
breaks
also
the-
more of a camera guy than
Yeah.
I am, so that's
Maybe
that
that's what
also
it
could
is.
be
I don't
part
know.
of it, too.
I always have a problem
So-
with zooms that aren't used
All right.
for comedic purposes most of the time.
So then I think at that point that leaves the ending, which I think we generally can at least agree that probably the driving sequence needs to be increased with a little bit, with some actual dialogue.
Just some dialogue to
them
build up the
slowly-
decision with the gun.
Slowly getting to that desperate point of using the gun.
Yeah, just have them one by one lose hope until finally David gives in to the rest of them.
And he's the only one who's basically, because he's the one holding onto the gun, basically when he finally relents, and maybe they convince him it's a mercy. And but Tim still believe it long enough to where it's his guilt and it's not just someone else who talked him into it, but like he genuinely believes it, like he does in the actual movie. And I think you don't change anything.
Yeah,
from then on.
I loved it when the kid wakes up, because that just makes it hurt that much more.
Oh, that was great. I'm so glad that he didn't just stay awake. I mean, stay asleep. I'm so glad that his eyes.
Which again, I was like, because I was thinking in my head, okay, how does this play out the best? The best is they decide to die. The kid wakes up
from the outside of the car.
So he has to look him in the eye when he does it, and then immediately after, it turns out that they would have been okay, and that's pretty much how it played out. But yeah, just a little bit more build up to that decision instead of just it's time, and he goes okay, and they're all at, like, I don't know. I liked them. I liked most of them being. I didn't like David being at peace about it. I liked the rest of them being at peace about it. But to me, David should have been more conflicted.
He should, but he still needs to.
He needs to end up doing it for sure.
And
but at the end, he kind of picks up the gun, because the guy's like the older guy is like, yeah, it's time, and David's like, you're right. How do we do? And so then he starts counting the bullets. I liked him counting the bullets and dragging it out, but I feel like him finally being won over, as opposed to him just agreeing with everyone, would have sold that ending so much better, and it would have made the grief hit that much harder, because he didn't want to do it, but he was convinced by other people's fear, and he gave into his own fear, and that's kind of
I think that works for the theme of the movie,
because the whole thing is about how, not just about people giving into fear, but people rallying around bad ideas because of fear, and that would be him finally giving in to the bad ideas that he had been trying to fight against the whole movie.
One time that he finally listened to herd mentality, and he paid the price for it.
But yeah.
So, all right, I think we got that figured out. So that was our revision on The Mist.
Yeah, I hope you guys liked it. Definitely enjoyed the movie. If you haven't seen it, give it a watch. But yeah, I think our minor tweaks definitely would improve the movie.
And it's definitely very minor, like probably compared to most of the movies that we cover on here.
I mean, it's just a few small tweaks to really just sell the point home. I think
swap out one character in one area, change a couple little dialogues, add a little character here. Like, it's very little, but it does add so much, I think, to the movie.
I would agree. Well, that's going to do it for us today, guys. Thanks for listening, and until next time, keep watching movies.
See you guys.